$19.42. That's what I paid for the saddest looking chuck roast in the Walmart meat cooler, the one shoved in the back corner with a yellow markdown sticker on it, while the brisket 2 shelves over was going for almost 90 bucks. But here's what the old timers in Central Texas figured out generations ago. You can take that cheap, tough, forgotten cut and smoke it into something that slices like brisket, smokes like brisket, and fools almost anyone who eats it. Today I'm going to show you exactly how, step by step, with nothing fancier than salt, pepper, and fire. Quick bit of background so you know I'm not just repeating internet folklore. The tricks I'm using today come from the meat market tradition of Central Texas. Places like Lockhart and Taylor, where German and Czech butchers in the late 1800s started smoking the cuts nobody bought. That's the part people forget. Barbecue in Texas didn't start as a luxury, it started as a way to rescue cheap meat. Brisket itself was a throwaway cut before it became famous. So using those same techniques on today's cheap cuts isn't a hack or a shortcut. It's the whole original point. Let's start in the store, because the cook is won or lost right there in the cooler, before you ever light a fire. Walk past the brisket, walk past the ribeyes. What you're hunting for is chuck roast, the big shoulder cut, and at my Walmart it was sitting under $6 a pound. Compare that to brisket creeping past $5 or $6 a pound for a whole packer, except a packer weighs 12 to 14 pounds, so you're committing to a $70, $80, $90 cook. My chuck roast weighed just over 3 pounds. If I ruin it, I'm out the cost of a large pizza. But you can't just grab any chuck roast, and this is the first old Texas trick, because a butcher in Lockhart in 1905 wasn't reading labels. He was reading the meat. You want the roast with the most white webbing running through it, the fat woven into the muscle, what the old boys called marbling. Before marbling became a word on a steakhouse menu, that fat is your insurance policy. Over a long smoke it melts, bastes the meat from the inside, and keeps it from drying into shoe leather. 2 roasts, same price per pound, and one of them is going to be twice as good. The label won't tell you which, the webbing will. I also grabbed a second markdown find, and I want you to start doing this every single trip. Check for the yellow stickers. Meat gets marked down when it's a day or 2 from its sell-by date, and for smoking, that's meaningless, because you're cooking it today at temperatures that don't care. My sticker knocked another 30% off. Total damage at the register, $19.42 for enough beef to feed 6 people. Now why is this cut so cheap when it comes off the same animal as a $40 ribeye? One word, work. The chuck is the shoulder. It moves all day, every day, for the entire life of the animal. All that movement builds connective tissue, mostly collagen, and collagen is chewy, tough, frankly, miserable stuff when you cook it fast. Grill a chuck roast like a steak and you'll understand immediately why it's under $6. But collagen has a secret, and this secret is the entire foundation of Texas barbecue. Hold it at low temperature in moist heat for a long time, and it doesn't stay tough. It melts. It converts into gelatin, the same silky, rich stuff that makes oxtail and short rib so luxurious. Every dollar you didn't spend at the register, you're going to pay for in hours instead. That's the trade. Money for time. The old Texans had no money and plenty of time, which is exactly why this style of cooking exists. So the tough cut is the reason we season it the way we do, and this is where most beginners sabotage themselves. They buy a $9 shaker of something called Smoky Bourbon Blast, with 14 ingredients, half of which are sugar, and sugar burns black and bitter over a 12-hour fire. Central Texas joints season brisket with salt and coarse black pepper. That's the rub. 2 ingredients. The Germans who built those meat markets were seasoning for preservation and flavor, not for a label. And 120 years later, the best barbecue in America still comes off that same 2-ingredient rub. Mix it roughly half and half by volume, kosher salt and 16 mesh pepper, which just means coarse ground, the kind that looks like tiny gravel. Coat every surface of the roast, don't be shy. A lot of it renders off with the fat. Then, if you have the patience, another old trick, salt it the night before and let it sit uncovered in the fridge. The salt migrates into the meat overnight and seasons it deep, and the surface dries out, which matters more than you'd think. because a dry surface is what smoke sticks to. Wet meat steams. Dry meat forms bark, that dark, peppery, crusty exterior that makes Texas barbecue look like a meteorite in the best possible way. Fire time. And no, you do not need a $3,000 offset smoker. I'm cooking on an ordinary kettle grill, the kind that shows up at every garage sale in America for 20 bucks. The trick is how you build the fire. Bank all your charcoal on one side, meat on the other side, so nothing sits over direct flame. Some folks call it the snake method when you lay the coals in a long fuse that burns slowly around the edge. Either way, the target is 250 to 275 degrees, and the target barely matters compared to the real rule, which is stability. The old pit masters tended fires all night with no thermometers at all. They read the fire by holding a hand over the pit and counting. You have a lid thermometer. You're already ahead of 1905. For wood, Central Texas means post oak, and if your store has oak chunks, grab them. If not, hickory works, pecan works. 2 or 3 fist-sized chunks on the coals, not a mountain. White billowing smoke is dirty smoke, and it makes meat taste like an ashtray. You want thin, almost invisible blue smoke whispering out of the vent. If you learn to see the difference between white smoke and blue smoke, you've learned more than most backyard cooks ever do. Meat goes on, lid goes on, and now comes the hardest technique in all of barbecue, leaving it alone. Every time you lift that lid, you dump your heat and add 20 minutes to the cook. The saying in Texas is that if you're looking, you ain't cooking, and it survives because it's true. Around 3 hours in, something happens that has crushed the spirit of every first-time smoker in history. The internal temperature climbs beautifully to about 150 degrees, and then it stops. Dead for hours. It's called the stall, and it isn't your fire dying, and it isn't your thermometer lying. The meat is sweating, and that evaporating moisture cools it exactly like sweat cools you, in a perfect standoff with your fire. People panic here. They crank the heat, they give up, they pull the meat early and chew through the consequences. The old Texas answer is the trick this whole video has been building toward. Wrap it. Pitmasters call it the Texas crutch. Take butcher paper if you have it, foil if you don't, and wrap that roast up tight like a brisket-shaped present, then put it right back on. The wrap traps the moisture so it can't evaporate, the standoff breaks, and the temperature starts climbing again. Paper breathes a little and keeps the bark crisper. Foil steams a little and goes faster. Both beat sitting there at 150 watching your afternoon disappear. From here, you're writing it to a number, and the number is not the one your steak chart taught you. Medium rare means nothing today. You're taking this roast to around 203 degrees internal, deep into what any steak lover would call ruined, because that's where the collagen finishes its transformation into gelatin. The real test isn't even the number. Slide a probe or a skewer into the thickest part. When it goes in like the meat is soft butter with no resistance at all, it's done. The old timers did it by feel with a finger poke through a towel. Probe tender, that's the phrase, that's the finish line. Except it isn't, quite, because now you have to survive the rest. 1 more hour, wrapped, in a dry cooler or a turned off oven. I know, you've waited 9 hours and the whole backyard smells like Lockhart, but cut it now and the juice you spent all day protecting runs straight onto the cutting board. Resting lets everything settle and redistribute. The big Texas joints rest briskets for 8, 10, 12 hours. You only owe this one 60 minutes, then you slice against the grain, pencil thick, and this is the moment. The bark is nearly black, the smoke ring is a deep pink band under the crust, and the slices bend over your knife without falling apart, which is exactly how a Texas joint judges a brisket slice. I handed a piece to my neighbor without saying a word, and he asked me where I bought the brisket. $19.42, cooked with tricks older than the state highway system. That's the payoff. The cheapest beef in the store, eating like the most expensive thing on any barbecue menu in America. And if today lit that fire in you, I took everything from this cook and every other budget cut, the pork shoulder version, the whole chicken version, the fire charts and wrap timings, and put it all in one organized guide called the Texas BBQ Playbook. Scan the QR on screen or grab the link in the description. Now, back to the meat because you're about to have leftovers, and this is where the chuck actually beats brisket. Chopped chuck sandwiches the next day are, in my kitchen, better than the day one slices. Chop it rough, splash in a little of the fat you saved from the wrap, pile it on white bread with pickles and onions, and you have recreated the original Texas meat market lunch, which was served exactly that way. On butcher paper, no forks, no plates. And the technique you just learned isn't a chuck roast technique. It's a tough meat technique. Pork shoulder at $1 something a pound. Beef ribs when they hit markdown. Even that mystery picnic roast nobody touches. Salt, pepper, clean smoke, wrap through the stall, cook to probe tender, rest. 5 moves, and the whole bottom shelf of the meat case opens up to you. One last thing worth sitting with. The cuts we ignore today are cheap for the same reason brisket was cheap in 1900, because nobody wanted to put in the hours. Then people did, and brisket became so famous it now costs more than the ribeye it once sat beneath. Which makes me wonder what happens when everybody figures out the chuck roast. So here's my question for you, and I'd love to hear it in the comments. What's the cheapest cut you've ever turned into something great? The one you'd never admit the price of at the dinner table? If this saved you $70 on your next cook, subscribe, because next week I'm taking on the $10 Walmart pork shoulder with the same old tricks, and that one might be even better.